Rosalind asked David. When will you return to London? When will you go to America? David Hunter shot her a quick, astonished glance across the breakfast table and said, Aren't we in a hurry? What's wrong with this house? He then quickly turned his gaze, full of admiration, around the room where they were having breakfast. The Foroback house was built on the slope of a hill. From its vantage point, one could see a panoramic view of the hidden English countryside. On the edge of the meadow, the garden was planted with thousands of daffodils, which were nearing the end of their blooming season. Still, their golden color covered the ground like an extended carpet. Rosalind, while toasting bread for herself, said that she would travel to America as soon as possible. Yes, but it's not that simple. There are priorities, and neither you nor I have any work excuses to offer. Things are always difficult in the aftermath of wars. He felt a slight discomfort as he spoke, as the reasons he gave for her health seemed more like excuses. He wondered if the girl sitting across from him appeared that way, and he wondered why she suddenly seemed so eager to travel to America. Rosalind enjoyed the fact that they would stay there only for a short time. She didn't say they would live there. What's wrong with Worsley before, and in your priorities? Tell me. Family of Claude? Yes, they're exactly what I find amusing and satisfying. I love seeing their haughty faces filled with vanity and spite. Don't deny me this pleasure, Rosalind, she said in a soft, troubled voice. I hope you don't feel that way. I don't like that. Cheer up, my dear. Fate has scattered us enough, both you and me. While the Claude family lived an important life, living off the big brother, and we lived off of crumbs. I hate people like them, and I always have. She said in shock. I don't like hating people. It's painful. How can they hate you? Were they kind and friendly with you? She asked warily. Were they not nice? They wanted to be. My innocent child. They wanted that. Then he laughed recklessly and added, if it weren't for their self-preservation, we might have found you one beautiful morning with a knife in your back. She shuddered and said, don't say such things. Couldn't it be a knife but rather a bit of poison in your life? She stared at him, troubled, and said, you must be going back to your seriousness. He replied, don't be upset, Rosalind, you've had a severe shock, but it's over now. No more bombs. Don't think about it. Don't remember it. The doctor recommended the fresh country air and a quiet life, so I want to keep you away from London. Is that really the reason? Is that the reason? Maybe. What did you say? Rosalind said with a sigh. I thought you wanted to stay here for her. For her? You know who I mean, the evening girl who was in the Navy. Suddenly, his face hardened and he said, Lynn Marchmont? She means something to you, David. Lynn Marchmont? She's the fiancée of that good-natured, slow-thinking bull, Raleigh Claude. I liked talking to her that night. Oh, please, Rosalind? And you saw and met her again, didn't you? Yes, I saw her near the farm the morning before yesterday when I was out riding the horse. And you'll meet her again. Of course I will always meet her. This is a small area where you can't take 2 steps without bumping into a Claude family member. But if you think I'm in love with Lynn Marchmont, you're mistaken. She's a proud, arrogant, unpleasant girl who doesn't know manners. I hope Raleigh is happy with her. No, my little one, she's not my type. She asked with some submissiveness, are you sure of that, David? Of course. She said with a hint of resignation, I know you don't like me reading tarot cards, but they give accurate results and predictions. I saw through the cards a girl bringing trouble and sadness, a girl coming from the sea. I also saw a dark stranger entering our lives, bringing danger, and I saw the card of death. And David interrupted her, laughing. Oh, you and your superstitions. What a bundle of doubts you are. Don't deal with any dark stranger. That's my advice to you. He then left the house, laughing, but as he moved away from the house, a cloud returned to cover his face. He frowned and began muttering to himself about his bad luck and how Lynn would come back home and mess things up. At that moment, he realized he was on a path that might lead him to encounter the girl he had just spoken about with such intensity. Rosalind watched him as he crossed the garden and went out through the small gate leading to the public dirt path through the fields. She then went up to her room and reviewed the clothes in her wardrobe. She always enjoyed touching and feeling her fur coat. She could never shake the feeling of wonder and amazement at owning such a coat. It was while she was in her room that the maid came up to inform her that Mrs. Marchmont had come to visit. Mrs. Adela Marchmont was sitting in the sitting room, her lips pressed tightly together, her heart beating slower than usual. She had been gathering her strength and mustering her resolve to make a plea to Rosalind for days, but her nature made her hesitate. She was also disturbed to find that Lynn's stance had unexpectedly changed, and she was now strongly opposed to her mother's attempt to ask the widow Gordon for a loan to ease their burdens and worries. However, another letter from the bank manager that morning compelled Mrs. Marchemont to act practically. She could no longer delay, and since Lynn had gone out early, Mrs. Marchemont had seen David Hunter walking away on the dirt path. Thus, the setting was empty and ready. She particularly wanted to meet Rosalind alone, without David present, as she correctly estimated that Rosalind alone would be an easier target. Nevertheless, she felt a great deal of nervousness and embarrassment as she waited in the sunlit sitting room, although she felt slightly relieved when Rosalind entered, appearing more than usually self-assured. Mrs. Marchemont always called this look the half-wit expression, and Adela Marchemont thought to herself, I wonder if that is due to her genuine innocence. Was it always like that? Rosalind stammered, Good morning, is there something? Mrs. Marchemont replied enthusiastically, What a beautiful morning, all the early lilies have bloomed at my place, have they bloomed at yours? The girl stared at her in bewilderment and said, I don't know. Adela thought to herself, what does one do with someone who doesn't talk about garden affairs or dogs, the standard fallback topics for rural conversations? Her maid had said, unable to hide the slight bitterness that had crept into her tone. There are, of course, many gardeners, and they handle all of that. I think we are short of them. Old Mullard says he needs 2 men, but it seems we have a severe shortage of labor. The words came out in a makeshift manner, like the babbling of a child who has heard something from an adult. Yes, she was indeed a child, and Adela wondered if her charm lay in that very childish trait. Could it be that the smart and practical businessman Gordon was drawn to her not only because of her beauty but also because of this childlike quality? Did it have to be genuine, or was it just affectation that had become second nature? Rosalind said, David has gone. These words brought Mrs. Marchemont back to herself. David might return, and her chance was fleeting now, and she shouldn't squander it. She hesitated, but eventually forced out the words, I wonder if you are willing to help me. Help you? Rosalind looked puzzled, not understanding anything. It's very difficult. As you know, Gordon's death has made a huge difference in our lives. Then Adela addressed Rosalind in her mind, saying, You foolish woman, you must continue to stare at this desolate situation. You know what I mean. You must know, you were once poor too. At that moment, she hated Rosalind for finding herself there, with Adela Marchemont sitting there, pleading for money, and thought to herself, I can't do this, I can't. In a brief moment, all the long hours of anxiety, thinking, and planning flashed back in her mind, selling the house. But where would she move? There were no small houses nearby, and certainly no cheap lodgings available. She couldn't manage without hiring a staff. She simply couldn't. Not ever. If only Lynn could help. But Lynn was going to marry Raleigh. Would she live with Raleigh and Lynn? No, that could never happen. Get a job, any job, and who would want an elderly, tired, untrained woman? Finally, her voice came out angry and defiant because she despised herself. I mean money. Money? Rosalind appeared strikingly surprised, as if money was the last thing she had expected to be mentioned, and Adela stubbornly continued, squeezing the words, I have exceeded my bank balance, and I have bills, repairs, I haven't paid the wages yet, everything has decreased by half, the high taxes. Gordon used to help with household matters, he used to handle all repairs, including roofs and painting, and besides that, regular allowances. He used to pay them to the bank every 3 months, and he always said, don't worry, and of course, I never worried at all. I mean, things were fine when he was alive, but now. She felt shame and embarrassment, but at the same time, relief, as she had finally surpassed the worst part, and if the girl refused, let her refuse. Yes, it was that simple. Rosalind looked extremely distressed and said, Oh, my dear, I didn't know, I never imagined. Well, of course, I'll ask David. Adela stopped her with a desperate tone. Can't you give me a check now? Yes, dear, I think I can manage that. Rosalind began to rise and went to the desk, searching through several drawers, and finally pulled out a checkbook, saying, Here, write it. How much? Adela, feeling like a beggar, wrote, £500. Rosalind, looking slightly embarrassed, took the check from Adela, seemingly as if it was her own. She said awkwardly, I hope this is suitable. I am really sorry. Adela took the check and looked at the childish handwriting inscribed on the red paper. Mrs. Marchemont, £500. 500, Rosanine Cloud. It is very kind of you, Rosalind. Thank you for your help. Please understand that I should have thought of you. It is very kind of you, my dear. Adela Marchmont felt like a different woman after the net was set on her. The channel was truly very kind regarding this matter. It would be up to the director to extend the interview. Thus, she bid farewell and left, smiling as she walked in the garden, saying cheerfully, Good morning. And she went on quickly,